Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chasing Psychological Safety. We're talking to you today again about the future of work, the present of work, the now of work, when it comes to what we need to be doing to ensure that this new reality of hybrid doesn't catch us out and doesn't become one of those pivotal moments in which we didn't do the right thing. Because I do believe that is a serious risk we're facing if we're not going to be very intentional, very clear, and very courageous about this next period. So one of the things we were saying in yesterday's article springs to mind from some of the conversations that have happened in the news and in the public eye in the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks. One of them comes from a company you guys would have heard of called Basecamp. I'm not going to go into the whole political conversation there, neither am I going to address what the cultural moves mean over there, but one part of the letter that one of the founders wrote did really strike a chord with us and made us think about things, no less because we've been saying some of that same exact thing for the last, 2 or 3 years now. So what they were saying there was that despite the fact that they had been a remote company all along, one of those companies that had a head start to this immediate reality that we all have been thrust into with the pandemic, alongside the likes of Cisco or GitHub, they also had realized that this last year has been a very year and a half even, has been a completely different story for them. And in the last 18 months, they had never met in person. And what they need now is an occasion to rehumanize. And I think that word is amazing, and we should absolutely all jump on it and embrace it, because it is something we all need to do. We need to rehumanize. We need to shake hands, hug, become humans with each other again, ideally in the real world in person. And there are some steps there that fall into what would make for good dynamic of a team doing those, and what would then obviously translate into psychological safety for those teams. We'll give you some of those tips and steps today. Hopefully you can come up with more yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some ideas and thoughts as to how you could lay out that rehumanizing in-person process. And one of the first of those is to think about, what tool could you use in that session to get the team focused on, now we're all together, how can we work on how we work together? So the first of those is by somebody who, we like the work of a lot, called Gustavo Rossetti and the Liberationist organization. And that's his hybrid team working canvas. Focuses on work when you're together and work when you're not together, and how you can make all of that work in the remote/hybrid work environment. Naturally, it's got psychological safety right there, as it has in all of his team canvases as well. So that's a really great tool that you can start looking at. The other one is our team relaunch, which is in the software. And that focuses again on reconnecting as a team, looking at psychological safety as a baseline for that team, and also how we work together, the ways of working, how we connect, and how we do our work together. And it's just two, those are just two really great tools that you can use to focus in on ways of work when you have that precious time together.
Right. So once you have chosen your weapon of choice and you're using one of these or another one that helps you frame it, then as Fionn said, the central part of that is a recontracting around the ways of work. How all do we do this? And that to a degree includes why do we do this? So maybe going back to your purpose, going back to finding a way to make that work translate into outcomes and not be work for the sake of work. And finding a way to resonate with that personally and on a very human level is a really important part of this conversation. Gustavo has some parts of it that drive you towards it. We also advise that you go towards it with some of the bits from the team relaunch play. But one of the things we have said over and over again that will reframe the way you work, and it will remind you of your purpose as well, is if you do nothing else, at least find a way to split your work into 3 different categories. And those are individual work, stuff that you can do as a one human, one person, one worker, one employee. Then have group work, stuff that you can only do if you're a team, so only together, only in a meeting, only collaboratively. And then lastly, client work, stuff that you have to be present for, stuff that is at a certain set time and so on. If you reframe around those 3 types of work, it will inform your definition of hybrid work. It will inform your definition of working hours, your definition of where, and your definition of how. So at least go ahead and figure out what those 3 bits are and how your work fits into them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some other interesting rules around ways of working virtually that are really important. And we've most recently seen this coming out in the work that Atlassian is doing, who a lot of you will know about as an organization as well, to set their remote/hybrid culture. And one of the rules that we're looking at with hybrid teams is one remote, all remote. So if you've got a team that's all together, that's got a meeting coming up, and one or two people in a team of 10 or whatever can't attend in person, then everybody should be online. Everybody should be at their desks in order to create equity in the team, in order to create that equality in the team, and to give people the opportunity to all engage at the same level and with the same baseline of ways that they can engage with the conversation that's happening. So there's one remote, all remote, and there's also an idea that's emerging around all with cameras off or all with cameras on. So this is another way of creating equity in a team interaction online. So if you can imagine, at the moment, it's kind of some people have got their cameras on, some people have got their cameras off. But if you all do it at the same time, first of all, you're all fully engaged in the conversation when you're all fully engaged, but it also gives people an opportunity to take a break together. So let's all just take our cameras off, have a chill. We can look away from the screen. And what's really an interesting theme in all remote working is working offline, working asynchronously. So you can do that in your team meetings as well. You can all say, right, let's do some individual work for 5 or 10 minutes. Let's turn our cameras off. Let's all take a break. Or let's just have that during our discussions. But let's make it equitable, and let's all buy in to the ways that we're behaving in the remote environment in order to make remote and hybrid work.
Right, and we recognize that these are quite big departures from what we used to think of, but they are things that you're going to have to kind of work out regardlessly. And again, if you have the framework, it should be slightly easier. One of the other things that we would advise that's not in the vocabulary of most teams is, typically when we talk about one-to-ones, we're talking about a manager talking to their direct line reports, and or team leader speaking to anyone in the team. We advise that as part of this new permission of being human at work, as part of this new openness towards emotion, as part of this new drive that it's all right to have an EQ'd conversation and an empathic point of view, we think it's really important that team members start talking to each other one-on-one as well. In particular, if they have had this year or year and a half of no interaction in person. So make sure that you get those meetings in the calendar as well. And if you're a team manager, encourage your team members to do them, to get that time where they connect between each other, whether it's one-on-one or one-on-two or in smaller subgroups than the larger team. And in a social setting, it's incredibly useful. Think of them as accidental bumping into each other at the coffee cooler, only virtually. Get those one-on-ones scheduled forensically to get that emotional bond to become stronger at the time that we need it more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in any kind of conversation that you're in, be it one-to-one, be it in the main team conversation, be it in sub-team conversations, this idea that we've talked about a lot, which relates to one of our plays in the software of the catch yourself counter with regards to impression management, is really useful. Super simple. The negative behavior of psychological safety is not speaking up for fear of appearing incompetent, intrusive, negative. If you catch yourself doing that, find a way to just reflect and think, why did I do that? Even if you don't change the behavior immediately, but even if you just think, there was something there that stopped me from speaking up, reflect on it later and think about how that could impact your behavior in the future, how you could make a change on that. If you see it in other people, help them to understand that they might be not speaking up for some reason, or to just have a really constructive conversation with your team colleagues around why you think maybe they're not speaking up. Is there something going on that we need to help them with? And that catch yourself counter just really helps to minimize and lower impression management, that not speaking up for fear of something in teams, which then raises psychological safety. And then the final thing to say here is that what we've given you is a skeleton for rehumanizing in person. So we're thinking about those times that that structure, that's the virtue of which is being extolled now by lots of companies that are really experienced in remote, but have had that experience that Basecamp have had of, we did all remote before, but we haven't seen each other for 18 months, and we realize the need to rehumanize and to meet 3 or 4 times a year to come back together, but in that time just to really refocus on ourselves as a team and a set of human beings. So what we're giving you and trying to build for you today is a skeleton for that and a structure for that. But then, of course, also come and talk to us for the actual measurement of psychological safety through software, which will really power you forward from there. So thanks for listening today, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.